Hey, welcome everybody to another Wednesday afternoon trauma talk. Some of you would have received emails just recently, short notice, and I know it's short notice. This is our fourth session, but we're going to do these every Wednesday. We'll probably take off 2 Wednesdays over the Christmas period. Otherwise, 50 weeks of the year, we're going to be here talking about trauma, but more importantly, talking about how people can overcome trauma, heal from trauma, reclaim their life after being traumatized. So this is the fourth in the 7 T's of trauma. On the first session, we talked about the tragedy and the theft. When a person's been traumatized, they've experienced a tragedy. And again, I'll just go over it quickly. Those can happen one of 3 ways. Something bad happens to the person. The person does something bad to somebody else, like perhaps hits somebody with a car or something of that nature. And then the third way is really interesting. You can witness something very bad happening to another person that you're helpless to intervene on. And MIT did a study, and that's the most traumatizing thing that can happen to you. And tragedies and traumas happen in 2 sizes. To make it simple, small t trauma, Bessel van der Kolk and Gabor Mate talk about small t traumas as happening pre-verbal. And then big T traumas are the big events of our life that are really negative. When you've experienced one of these tragedies, it's not the tragedy that's the trauma. The trauma is actually how your brain reacts to that tragedy. And when you have had a tragedy and your brain moves into this traumatic response, that trauma is a thief. The trauma steals from you. And the first thing it steals is your ability to sleep. And this is not trivial. This is the beginning of a cascade of really negative events if you don't get a grip on it. And sleeping medications don't fix it. All right. And when your sleep is stolen for a week, a month, a year, your whole life starts getting unraveled. Now, when you've had your sleep stolen, you're going to get a bunch of other things stolen. You'll have your mental health stolen. You'll have your physical health stolen. You might lose your friends. You might lose your family. You might lose your career. And unfortunately, a lot of people lose their life. Now, when trauma goes unresolved, this is what we talked about in week 2. You can have mental torment. Mental torment means you wake up in the morning, foggy-headed, hyper-vigilant, hyper-aware, jumpy, aggressive, untrusting. You're tormented mentally all the time with flashbacks, and you keep replaying the tragedy that you experienced over and over and over again, right? Then if this goes on long enough, you start become physically tortured. And that physical torture, Gabor Mate talks about this. He says that the root cause of all physical and mental dis-ease, 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 is unresolved trauma. And he goes further to say that the root cause of all chronic illness, chronic pain, chronic fatigue, IBS, is unresolved trauma. So we go through this syntax, this sequence where we have a tragedy, we have a traumatic response, that trauma steals our ability to sleep, then it starts stealing everything else, we're mentally tormented, and then we're physically tortured. Anybody who survives, thrives, grows, and reclaims their life is tenacious. And we talked about tenacity and treatment last week. You have to be tenacious. In Canada, you have to be tenacious because the system's broken. Nobody's coming for you. There's not enough funding for mental health. And the people we go to, general practitioners, don't know enough about mental health. And yet 95% of people in Canada, when they can't sleep or their emotions are unregulated, will go to their general practitioner. And that general practitioner almost inevitably will prescribe medication. There are no medications that enhance the quality of sleep. There's medications that help you fall asleep and stay asleep. They don't enhance the quality of sleep. There are no medications that heal trauma. I'll say that again. There's no medications that heal trauma, including hallucinogenics. When you use hallucinogenics, you also do something else, some form of therapy while you're under the influence of the hallucinogenics. Otherwise, we could just all do MDMA or ketamine at home and all be healed of trauma, and it just doesn't work that way. So you have to be tenacious. And most people end up, in my experience, going through 3, 4, 5 or more therapies, interventions, and are still traumatized. And they either give up and just say, look, I'm so broken that I'll never heal, or they get tenacious and they try and find another one. So you have to be tenacious. Now, the good news is that in our world today, there are treatments emerging that have high efficacy, high success. What does high efficacy mean? High efficacy is greater than 90% with little to no recurrence. And those modalities, these interventions that are emerging, are fast. They can be delivered literally in days and weeks, not months and years. So if you've been a trauma sufferer and you've been on medications for a decade, it's unfortunate, but today there are modalities that can heal fast. And they're non-re-traumatizing. They don't require any medications, and they are researched at some of the leading institutions in the world. King's College in England, Walter Reed Hospital in the States, the Uniformed Services University in the United States. This literature is emerging, and in the next 3-5 years, the gold seal for trauma interventions will include a particular modality in those interventions that is recognized to have these efficacies over 90% with no recurrence. And to put that in perspective, most other therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy has less than a 50% success with very high recurrence rates up around 80%. King's College, again, just did a study using this neuroscience-based technique that's similar to NLP versus trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. So highly focused cognitive behavioral therapy for trauma, and the results in King College, again, one of the leading institutes in the world, said that this NLP-based neuroscientific intervention was 300% better than trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy in 1/6 of the time. 1/6 of the time. So if you're suffering, I have a free link in the comments below. Hit that and book a consult with me, and I'll tell you where to find a clinician that's using one of these novel emerging interventions, right? There's also a link in the consult below, or in the comments below, and you can download a copy of our ebook, The 7 T's of Trauma. We actually call it Inspired Healing, and it has all 7 T's of trauma there. All right, so that's a freebie if you want that book. So a free consult if you want to find a clinician who can help you, and a free ebook. So today I want to talk about triumph, and it's under the blue border there. There we go, triumph. Because at the end of the day, that's what's really important, right? That's what's really, really important. And if you take nothing else away from these 4 sessions, and you can watch all of these 4 sessions on YouTube, take this away. Trauma is an injury that can heal. I'll just say that again. Trauma is an injury that can heal. Now, I don't know anybody who hasn't had an injury, a cut. Like I'm nursing a cut right now. I have a cut and it's healing miraculously. I've broken my arm. I've broken my collarbone. I've broken my fibula and tibula. All of them healed. All of them healed. Something in me miraculously knows the blueprint for my body and rebuilt all of that structure newly. And imagine for a moment if we think of trauma as an injury, not as a disorder, that we've had this intense traumatic event or tragedy that created a traumatic response. And what we're experiencing, the pain and the suffering we're experiencing, are the symptoms of an injury. Just like when you break your arm, you're in a lot of pain. The pain is not the injury. The pain is a symptom of the injury. And when you take a painkiller, when you have a broken arm, you're not healing the arm, you're mitigating the pain. So what if we approach trauma differently? What if we looked at trauma as an injury and we heal the injury, the actual traumatic event? Now, we've been fortunate in 10 years of practice. I've worked with over 500 clients. I've taught these emerging interventions across North America for my own company and for an organization in the United States. I've trained over 300 clinicians. A group of 18 of the clinicians I trained in Albuquerque, New Mexico, have over a 94% success rate with no recurrence. And if you want to see that research article, you can click on the website inspire.com, go to the research page, and it's either the second or third article down from the top. And just look for clinicians in Albuquerque, and it'll be right there, and you can see that work. And we like to share stories here. We recently did a pilot study with 14 women who had emerged from human trafficking. And of those 14 women, 3 withdrew from the program, but 11 completed the program. And of the 11, we used third-party psychometric assessor to assess all the women pre and post intervention. And the mean score out of a scale of 80, the mean score was around 49, and anything over 23 is considered PTSD. Between 10 and 23, you've been traumatized, but you're coping, and under 10, you're trauma-free. So when we started the survey and we surveyed all 14 women, their mean score was around 48 or 49. And then we did 5 2-hour sessions with each of the women, very rigorous, done the same way. Then we waited 2 weeks and did an exit interview. And on this exit interview, the mean score of the women was 6.1 of the 11 who completed the program. So 3 withdrew, 11 completed. 10 of the women scored very, very low, under the threshold of 10. And 1 woman, the 11th woman, had marginal improvement. So 10 out of 11 were completely successful, which is about a 91 or 92% efficacy. All right, so anecdotally, there are just story after story after story, not just from the work I've done, but from the clinicians that I've taught and their practice. And you can come onto our website, or you can talk to me. I can refer you to other clinicians who get fabulous results. If you're in Ontario or British Columbia, or anywhere actually in the world, and you're willing to work with a coach, life coaches can work cross jurisdictions, and life coaches can intervene in crisis, and life coaches can coach you to ameliorate symptoms. And if they're doing coaching to ameliorate symptoms and they use these NLP techniques, they can actually help you reduce your trauma score from wherever they find you to less than 10, right? If you're working with a licensed healthcare professional, I've trained some in British Columbia, Ontario, Florida, New Mexico, and those people have gone on and become trainers and trained others. So wherever you live, if you're willing to work with a coach, we'll find you a coach to work with. If you want to work with a licensed mental health care practitioner, we'll do our best to find somebody who's doing one of the emerging techniques that have these high efficacy rates, so you can triumph. So you can be one of the stories of triumph. So you can wake up fully rested in the morning, fall asleep easily and effortlessly, sleep through the night like a baby, wake up rested, recover your mental health, recover your physical health, reclaim your families, your life, your career. That's triumph, right? All 5 levels. So again, if you want a copy of the free ebook, there's a link below. And if you'd like to book a free consultation, that'd be awesome. And we can discuss the possibilities for you and point you in the right direction, get you to the person who can help you best. And I'd love to do that for you. So we're going to open up the floor to questions here. That's what we're committed to do. I could literally talk for 8 hours straight. That would be inappropriate. But I'm more interested in the questions that you have and answering those. So if you have questions, drop them in the chat. How do I know if I'm really healing or just coping? What a great question, right? What a great question, because I know so many people who have been going to therapy for years, and they say they feel really good after therapy, but 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, they have to go back for another session because that feeling good has eroded. So I'm going to suggest to you that that person's not healed, that what they did is in the session, they ameliorated or lowered their symptoms, their suffering, but they weren't healed. one of the great ways to measure whether you're healed or coping is, can you fall asleep unmedicated? A traumatized person will have difficulty falling asleep and staying asleep. So if you can fall asleep and sleep 7-8 hours easily and effortlessly, chances are you're healing or healed, not coping. And then there's some other ways as well. You are not irritable. If you're still irritable, if you're still easily triggered. So if somebody triggers you, or if something triggers you into an emotional state that is inappropriate or unwarranted for the situation you're in, then you're not healed. You're coping. I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense? You just put a thumbs up. Cool. What's the best way to help clients recognize their own triumphs? Well, go back to the first question, is the ability to sleep. Once you start sleeping, life gets better. Life gets better. You're able to smile more, right? Then, let's say somebody was assaulted in a city park, and after that assault, they couldn't go out, say in the evening or night, because they were afraid of being assaulted. They certainly couldn't go to parks, and certain people would trigger them, right? So one of the best ways to help a client recognize their own triumphs is if they've actually healed the trauma, then they can go out to a city park. Now, in this time we live in, the neuroscience and the interventions we do don't erase memories. We have full access in detail to the memories. They're just no longer triggering inappropriate or unwarranted emotions. So we still have the learnings, we still have the education, but we don't have the suffering. So that's how I would help people recognize their own triumph, is what are they able to do? Are they able to go back to work? Are they able to reclaim their life? If you're a firefighter, can you go back to your job? If you're a military person, can you go back and serve your country, right? Without the duress, without all the negative emotions. I hope that answers your question. Other questions? We'll wait just a couple seconds more. I'll just talk while we wait, see if there's any more questions. We are launching an app. That app will launch in about 90 days. It's been under development for 3 months. Now, some of you who use AI and have used Passion.io or those other online apps or white label apps, those are web-based apps. This is a native language mobile app that'll be available on Google and Apple stores, so it takes a little more development time. It will have self-administered psychometric assessments in them that will allow a person to know the degree to which they're traumatized, and then after they finished the program inside the app, it'll allow the person to see their improvement. And the program inside the app will be around 8 to 12 weeks in duration. There'll be a lesson, say on day 1, and then 2 days to practice the lesson, and then a lesson on day 4, 2 days to practice, and then we'll take the 7th day off. We'll do that for 8 or 9 or 10 weeks before we do the next assessment. Now, if a person scores free of trauma, then we'll move forward. We're going to have a community of content where we share triumph amongst others, where we provide more content on how to do emotional regulation, how to manage our emotional states, how to just empower ourselves. If a person scores still fairly high for trauma, they'll have 1 or 2 choices. They can go back to the beginning of the program, start over, or they can book a free consult, and we'll try and find a methodology that's more important for them. So that app will be out on December 1st. We're really excited about that, because the reality of trauma is probably 95% of the people who are suffering from trauma are women. And the lion's share, the majority, the bulk of those women suffer in silence because they don't have the financial resources to engage in meaningful psychotherapy. And that's just a harsh reality. And to get it in perspective, 1 out of 3 women in North America have been sexually traumatized. That's a stat from McMaster University. And when I give that stat in public to audiences with females, I just lost everything. It says I'm off the internet. Okay. When I give that stat in audiences to females, the females always say, that's low. That's too low. And so if you do, here, I've got this. I'll do it. So if you do 400 million people in North America, and half of them are women, 200 million, and 1 out of 3 women are traumatized, then that means there's 66 million traumatized women in North America. That stat is stunning. That stat is staggering. And to know that most of them suffer in silence is just not okay. The other group of people that don't seem to put up their hand and ask for help are people who are stigma wary. There is a stigma with trauma. Now, if you've been human trafficked and you're traumatized, I'm muted for some reason. Okay. If you've been human trafficked and you're traumatized, there's a stigma putting up your hand and saying, look, I was traumatized because I was part of the human trafficking. There's certainly a stigma around that. If you're a police officer or a firefighter or military and you say, I have trauma or PTSD, there's a huge stigma around that. And so by having an app, people who are trauma wary can actually use the app in the privacy of their own home, and it'll be extraordinarily affordable. And so people can actually do it. And we believe, based on all the research and the literature that's available, that around 80% of the symptomology that people experience because of trauma can be mitigated or removed, healed, using these emerging technologies that we have available. Again, so I'll keep everybody abreast every Wednesday about that, and pretty soon we'll start putting links in to see samples of the upcoming app. All right, if there's no more questions, anything else? Oh yeah, there you go. And we've got another course coming up. I haven't actually issued the dates for that course yet. I'll do that in the near future. And so we'll be launching the course. We have the free ebook. And if you want to talk to me, book a free consult, please. All right. Thank you guys for joining me today. Cheers.